Good afternoon, good morning to all our attendees for today's webinar that I foresee being about 25 to 30 minutes, and during which I'd like to present you some of the key findings of our latest published study about specialty biocides. To do so, my presentation will be split into 4 parts. I'll go very quickly through an introduction of client and company for those of you who are not familiar. I will then get into the biocides topic, discussing the report scope and our methodology, and I will then, after presenting that scope and methodology, get into the market findings. So basically, what's the picture of the market in 2020? Before, in my final part, sharing with you what we think the biocide market should expect between 2020 and 2025. So let's get started with a quick introduction to Klein and Company. Klein is a global market research and management consulting company. Company is global, as I said, headquartered in Parsippany, New Jersey, and has 10 locations globally. So 3 in Europe, 1 in the Middle East, and 4 in Asia. This global network, the global coverage, is very important, notably when it comes to cover global market. So all of the local market are covered locally. Specialty chemicals is one of the Klein's sweet spots, and has been actually one of the company's sweet spots for years, for over 60 years now, actually. And it is one of the area that the company is covering, and that specialty biocides series of reports is part of our offering within the specialty chemicals area. A last point here that to highlight something that makes Klein very unique in the market research and the consulting world is our unique combination of services, from basically syndicated reports and databases down to management consulting services that could be strategies and business development, manufacturing and supply chain, looking at customer relationship, also looking at M&A advisory, as Ramin was mentioning a few weeks back. Our colleagues from the consulting area had a more M&A oriented presentation about the topic of biocides. So that was for Klein. Let's then get in the topic of today's interest, specialty biocides. And first, we're very quickly introducing you our history at Klein with specialty biocides. This is a franchise, this is a topic that we're covering for decades. We started in the 1960s with a coverage of the US market of specialty biocides that was then expanded to the market in Western Europe in the 1990s. And in the last 2 decades, as most of our other franchise, basically, we've reached a global coverage by covering other key global markets for biocides. That's notably China and India, but we have also covered Southeast Asia, Brazil, Mexico, the Middle East too. So a global coverage on this. This time in 2020, and for the time being, we have covered only the USA and Europe that we define as EU 28 plus Norway and Switzerland. That was a 2020 base year study, so it was still UK was in the EU, but otherwise it would have been a EU 27 plus UK, Switzerland, and Norway. So only Europe and USA this time, but it is very possible that by the end of this year we will add some new countries to our coverage based on the industry interest. Other, I'd say, adjacent areas that we're covering, adjacent areas to biocides that we're covering at Klein, personal care ingredients that cover also the antimicrobials part of the ingredients used in personal care application, ingredients in HI&I cleaning applications, also looking at the various ingredients used in cleaning formulations. So not only biocides, be it preservatives or disinfectants, but also surfactants and others. And a few other examples here of studies that are looking more at the finished product market and in the I&I sector, notably with janitorial and housekeeping cleaning products, food service cleaning products, and I&I wipes. If you would like any further information on any of those studies, we'll be glad. Please feel free to contact us. Contacts will be on the last slide of this presentation. We'll be glad to send you any more information. Now, I wanted to take a minute to explain you our methodology and to explain you basically where are the facts and figures that you're going to see in these reports, where they're coming from, or in this presentation. And really, that methodology is what makes us different at Klein. We are using a combination of primary research and secondary research where we do give a lot of weight to primary research. So basically, what is primary research? We're conducting unstructured interviews with market participants at different stages of the value chain. So for Biocides, it means we are interviewing manufacturers of active biocidal ingredients, distributors, formulators, end users, and with gathering their point of view within those unstructured in-depth interviews. And that very large part of the research process, that's about 60% of the time we spent on those projects, is then we add a layer of secondary research where we look at information we track from different sources, be it industry specific or company annual reports, etc. So then we do use the large primary research pool of information we got through and secondary research information to get our overall market data and market models, where basically it's very important, where the cross-checking of information through different sources is very important. So, well, I've mentioned our geographic scope. I mentioned we are covering US and Europe this time mostly. But on this slide, you can also see our product scope, so the active biocidal ingredient scope that we have this time. Really, this is only a selection. Really, what we're covering are all the specialty biocides that are used in the applications we cover. You can see, however, how we've decided to segment the market. So we have halogenated products where you will find products such as PVPI, Bronopol, DPNPA, inorganics, where you'll find a lot of products that are used notably in the wood preservation area, nitrogen-based, where the main key products are quats or DMDMH, phenolics, organometallics, organosulfurs with the large category of isotiazolinones, and some miscellaneous biocides. So that's for the products, and again, it was only a selection. Now, when it comes to the applications, we are looking at 5 key overall applications, but when you take the sub-application together, we're really looking at about 20 applications. I'll start with the 2 largest that are hygiene and industrial preservation. So hygiene actually encompasses agriculture, aquaculture, and HI&I cleaning products. We do also split out hospitals out of that part that's usually counted under I&I. It is split out in our biocide study. And then just a piece of information about agriculture. What we mean by agriculture is really animal biosecurity. So this is farm disinfection mainly. We then have the large category of industrial preservations with the applications such as paints and coatings, adhesives and sealants, but also antifouling marine coatings, metalworking fluids, and synthetic latex polymers. So we have those large 2 hygiene and industrial preservation categories. But we also do look at application within water treatment. So that's cooling water, paper, and recreational water, no municipal water here. And oil and gas, it's a water treatment application, obviously, but this is also considered separately. And finally, we are considering the wood treatment and the wood preservation application that we'll discuss more in the next few slides. I just wanted to mention that there's one application that you will not see here. That's the personal care applications. That's due to a choice. Basically, this is an application we're covering, as I was mentioning in my earlier slide, in another study, and therefore it's not included here. Would it be of interest to you? This is something we can, we can add to the coverage of our Biocides study. So now that we have an understanding of what we're looking in terms of scope, let's get in some key market findings of our latest study. To put this in perspective, to put the US and Europe data in perspective, I first wanted to give you our rough estimate of what's the global biocides market. And when I say rough, it's because we have not researched the global market in 2021, but only the Europe and the USA, as I was mentioning. But still, we believe that the market is valued at over $6 billion globally, with 3 key applications that are industrial preservation, overall hygiene, and then wood preservation. I was mentioning that on my slide before. With also with oil and gas and industrial water treatment being slightly smaller application. So this is the global perspective, and now digging in what we have actually covered in detail through an in-depth research that we are just finalizing now, or that we are just publishing now, and that's Europe and the USA. So for those 2 countries, we are estimating the market volume at about 800,000 tons. That's on a 100% active basis level, and valued at approximately $4.5 billion. So as you can see, US and Europe represent a very significant part, notably when we look at the market in value, a very significant part of the global consumption. This is notably coming from the fact that that the specialty biocides market, the part of the market that is driven by a bit more expensive biocidal active ingredients, is very important in those 2 countries. Another key information from this slide is also that the United States market is much larger than the market in Europe, and that's due to 2 key reasons. One, really looking at wood preservation, which is a market that's very large in the US, smaller in Europe, but also difference that's due to a larger market for water treatment in the US, and that we'll get in more details in a second. The last finding on this slide that's relatively interesting to see too is that you see that the Europe value share is slightly larger than the Europe volume share. So tending that translate basically in a higher average product price in Europe than in the United States. So I was discussing about the difference between those 2 markets. Actually, we see them very well on this slide here, with that represent volume consumption of biocides in the 2 regions by application, or by group of application, if you prefer. Those are absolute volumes. Those are not percentages, and really shows you where are the volumes, what makes the United States market so important. And really, a large part of the delta between those 2 markets is coming from this light green bar, which is for wood preservation. And then the second large difference is coming from water treatment here. Water treatment, where I was mentioning, we're covering cooling water, paper, and recreational water. The part that's very different in terms of size between the 2 regions is really recreational water. If we look at the market elsewhere, so if we look at industrial preservation and hygiene, notably oil and gas is also larger in the US than in Europe. But if we look at industrial preservation and hygiene, actually we would find out that the market is of comparable size between Europe and the United States. So that was for the application split. Large differences between the 2 markets, and actually those large differences between the applications can be found in the product split, because obviously, even if some products are used across applications, they are very specific. There are application specifics when it comes of the products used. So what we can see is that in the US, there's a large part of miscellaneous that would mostly be coming from some wood preservation chemistries, notably MCA and creosote, that are considered as miscellaneous. We'll also see a larger halogenated market than in Europe. And again, this is linked to the second key application difference, that's the water treatment and the recreational water, where chlorides, isocyanurates are used in large quantities. So obviously, in turn, a larger market for halogenated in the United States. When we look at organosulfur, that are an important part of the market in each of the market, and notably in Europe, this is the isothioazolinones that are leading this category, and notably CIT, MIT, and DIT. And finally, that's something that's a bit different in Europe, with a large part of nitrogen-based product that you'll find mostly coming from quartz. Those are percentages. So basically, the large part of quartz or the large part of nitrogen-based sales in Europe, it's more coming from lower sales of other categories than larger sales of quartz themselves or nitrogen-based biocides themselves. So I also wanted to reflect on regulations, because I believe that among the markets we're covering within the specialty chemical practice at Klein, biocides are by far those that are the most regulatory driven. The market has been reshaped very strongly in the last decades. For instance, formaldehyde releasers are mostly gone, but changes are still happening. What we do in our reports is that we really look at regulations and their impact application by application. So here I'll show you a few examples of those regulations that we believe are relatively important when it comes to what's happening on the market right now. But it's important to look at the regulation in a more granular way, and actually in a way that is application specific, because that's how you, even if the regulations themselves are product specific, they're affecting a product or a category of active ingredients, actually they affect a different application in different way, because in each application there's different suitable products, suitable alternatives, or they might be products that are used as co-biocides, if you want, where that would be affected by a regulation that's affecting another product. So this is the reason why we're looking at regulation application by application in our reports. On the top of having reshaped the product landscape in the last decade, as I was mentioning, regulatory has also have become very a break to innovation, really, because the regulation tightening has come with a very increased cost of registering products, which in turn makes that only useful biocides are staying on the market. Useful, by useful I want to say biocides that do have a commercial future, because nobody is going to invest on the registration of products that are not going to bring back that investment. And in the meantime, it has been, as I said, a break to innovation, a hurdle to innovation, because it is very difficult to and very expensive to register a new product, which is a reason why we have not, we've not seen new products for years, or new active ingredients for years on the biocides market. As I was mentioning, I have a few examples here of the products that of the regulations that I believe have been quite important in the last year or so. Starting with Europe, what we see is that that the entire thiazolinones family has been under scrutiny, notably MIT, OIT, CIT, MIT, with decrease in the concentration allowed for those products that's causing a switch to other solutions. We've also seen, DBNPA and triazines getting phased out. And another key factor is the great deal of uncertainty that's surrounding zinc pyrithione at that time. When we look more specifically at the US market, things are a bit more stable, I want to say, the US. That's because Europe has generally been pioneering the regulatory changes globally, and changes are therefore taking a bit longer to get in the United States. What we've seen is that at the end of the day, they usually happen too, but with some time difference. Still, the market in the US is also changing greatly due to regulations. That's notably the case in the wood preservation application, where PCP is out and CCA following the same path. Another thing to follow in 2021 will be the review of isothiazolinone toward the end of the year. So we've looked at mostly the consumption part of the market so far. I also wanted to have a few words about the supply side of things, with here a representation of the biocides value chain. Again, value chain is application specific. So it will be the structure of the value chain, the names you'd see on the value chain would be different from an application to another. But I believe that the example I have here on the screen is relatively common to a lot of the applications we're covering. The most direct route to market from a single biocidal active producer to the end use or the end user of that biocide is still a preferred route in some applications. It's notably in applications where you have large volumes of biocidal products sold to large end users. I can take the example of HI&I cleaning applications, for instance, where preservation formulation is still an expertise that some of the large end users have. On the contrary, on more industrial applications, you will find out that formulators have an increased importance. And you will also find out that some formulators are actually biocidal active producers. So you'll find names like BASF, Lanxess, DuPont, Lonza, all being biocidal active producers that have moved to the formulator market. And this is definitely a trend that we've seen over the last decade, that movement from single active to supply formulations in order basically to increase the profitability of the business. All right, I hope the sound is not too bad. We're being live and there's a thunderstorm happening at my place. Hopefully this will not cause a fall of the electricity, and we'll be able to finish this webinar. Still on the supply side of things, I also wanted to mention here that basically we are having a competitive landscape that have been reshaped greatly by M&A activities within the last 2 decades. I have a few examples on the screen. I don't want to go through all of them, but I'll just discuss some of those that have been very important. Starting in 2009 with the acquisition of Romanaz by Dow. Then we had in 2011 Lonza acquiring Arc Chemicals, making Lonza the largest biocides business in the world. Ashland acquired the ISP the same year. A few acquisitions happened, but actually we had an acceleration of the activity toward the end of last decade and within the last few years. Notably with the merger of DuPont Nutrition Bioscience business with IFF, Lanxess acquisition of IPEL, equity acquisition of Schülke, and last but not least, in 2021, the acquisition by Bain and Cinven of Lonza Specialty Ingredients business, Ashland acquiring Schülke, Lanxess acquiring Emerald Kalama, Clariant entering a JV with Indian Glycols. So a lot of activity, a lot of change in the competitive landscape of the biocides market, and we believe this is not over. Value shares with a top line figure for here, or a top line market share information for Europe and US taken together. What we can see is that Lonza, Coppers, and DuPont are the leading market suppliers of biocidal active ingredient suppliers in the United States and Europe, with a combined market share of 32%. What we can learn from this slide is really that the biocide market is still relatively fragmented, with the top 10 players having slightly over 50% market share on the market. And altogether, we have identified more than 70 suppliers in the two regions we've covered in 2021, so Europe and US, and 70 suppliers that are identified actually and split out in our database. We also can see that in the top 10 that you can see on this slide, we can find 3 wood preservation specialists. So obviously, with such a large application, notably in the United States, the largest specialists such as that are Coppers, Oxychem, and Rutgers Group are entering the top 10. Of course, a lot of other suppliers from that top 10 have also activity in wood preservation. I was just mentioning the pure specialist. What we would also see is that the competitive landscape is relatively different between Europe and the United States. You have more specialist companies, or their share is larger in the United States than it is in Europe, where you will find the market dominated by companies that have a wider product portfolio. Typically companies such as DuPont, Lonza, Troy, and Thor. As I was mentioning, of course, wood preservation companies are on the top of the sales in the United States. And also what we would see if we were comparing two regions is that within each application's competitors are relatively similar. I hope you can see this slide. It's relatively small, but what I wanted to say here is that what I've presented so far in this webinar were really top-line information. What you can see on this slide is the structure of our database that shows that the information that can be found there is much more granular than what I'm showing you today. What you can see here is that the database would show USA and then the different application, and in each application the different biocides being used, and for each active biocidal ingredient, the list of suppliers. So that's at that level that our database gives the information, both volume and value, and obviously by adding all products and all application, you get to the overall market share view that I was showing you a second ago. So that was really for the market picture in 2020. Let me spend the few last minutes of this webinar discussing with you what are our views for the 5 years to come when it comes to the biocides market in the USA and Europe. As I was mentioning before, biocides are really application-driven. It's an application-driven market and application-driven products. So to understand what's going, what
apologies for this technical. It's probably the thunderstorm, but Nicola will be back.
Yeah, let's give Nicola another a minute to rejoin, and I guess people can review what's in the slide as of now. And maybe this is something we can re-record as the final session and just send over to everybody who's attended. And so you guys have our view on what's going to be happening in the next 5 years and further. Yeah, it looks like his connection completely cut out since he was the one sharing the presentation. So since we were almost at the end of the presentation, I guess we'll have to just apologize for that. You know what, Ramin, if you can maybe bring it up, or I can do that, the presentation, so people can connect with us. But at any case, everybody will receive the email after the session tomorrow. With you can request and you can respond to that email, and you can request the presentation. But it looks like Nicola is back. See, here we go.
Yeah, Nicola is back.
Can you hear me? Sorry for that. So that was the thunderstorm I was speaking of. I'm on my mobile phone now, so hopefully this will work. Can you just tell me where did you lose me? I don't know.
You pretty much can start the final session. You really, you started talking about the 5-year outlook. And do you want me to share the slides, or are you okay?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. And I'm very sorry for that to our audience. That's what happened when in live sessions. So back here, I'm just hoping that my mobile phone will make it through the end of this webinar now. So having this full screen and getting back to our 5-year outlook. So I was mentioning that in an application-driven market, such as the biocides market, what's important to understand what's happening for the biocides is to understand what's happening in each and every of the applications that's covered. So on this slide, on the next slide, you'll see some of the key influencers when it comes to the applications we're covering. On the top of those, it's very important to take into consideration what's the impact of COVID-19 in each of those applications. It will have a direct impact in some of the application, IG notably. It will have an indirect impact, obviously, the whole situation on others, but obviously there's very little part of our economies that are left untouched by the current pandemic situation. So I want to go very quickly throughout some of the key influencers of the applications we're looking at. When we look at industrial preservation, we're looking at mostly GDP-based growth, notably the construction market for segments such as paints and coatings, adhesives and sealants, partly synthetic latex polymers too. And then we're looking at some very specific factors happening in each of those applications. For one example would be in the paints and coatings area. What's the state of the switch from solvent-based to water-based paints? Because obviously that has a direct impact on the volume growth for biocides. When it comes to water treatment, again, we're looking at for cooling water. This is overall industrial, so it has to do with energy production and industrial index. But then we're also looking in that water treatment area at paper, which is a bit more specific to the paper industry and what's happening with the growth or the decrease of paper production, notably due to the large growth of online marketing, and therefore the limited or the more limited production of paper and the closure of paper mills. Recreational water and hygiene are, I think, they're very different applications. But the reason why I want to put them together is that they're among those few that have been very positively impacted by the COVID-19 situation. Recreational water, because and notably in Europe, where recreational water was much smaller than in the US, where the number of pools per inhabitant is much smaller than in the US, there was a boom in the swimming pool business. where people wanted to avoid public swimming pools by acquiring a pool, and hygiene, which I think the most obvious link to the COVID-19 situation that I'll discuss in a second. Of course, then we have wood preservation that is also very closely linked to the construction market. And finally, oil and gas. That's an important market, notably in the USA, where I think the key factor at this point is the growth of the shale gas production. So I was mentioning the COVID situation quite at length during the last slides. I want to stop here and mention again, how has it impacted biocides and what do we expect the impact is going to be going forward? So today, really, and this is something I mentioned before, we have very few applications that have been positively impacted and a lot of applications that have been rather negatively impacted. So the negative impact are all the industrial application, really, where industrial output has been much slower in 2020 across the world. There was disruption in the supply chain. So oil and gas is the same. Is the same. It was not the best of the year for oil production. So obviously those were negatively impacted, and then there's positive impact of things. One will find mostly the hygiene application, and it is an application where we've seen in 2020 growth up to 80% compared to 2019 for some active ingredients that are obviously notably used in surface disinfection. So now the question is how long it will take for the negatively impacted industries to recover, and will the positive impact on hygiene, will they remain? So according to us, the hygiene-related product sales are going to remain high. There will be a correction because there was such a growth in 2020 that there will be a slight correction to get back to a more normal situation, but volumes will anyway stay higher than what they would have been without the COVID-19 situation. And on the other side of the spectrum, we do expect and we already see actually signs of recovery in industrial applications. But again, it will take years. We believe it will take years to get back to a level where we would have been if COVID-19 would not have happened. Another immediate impact that we saw was quite interesting: the less momentum for sustainability and naturality trend in home and personal care. Well, we'll not discuss much about personal care today, but this is something that was relatively important in the home care area. And then when we look at the longer term effects, it's difficult to predict because the longer term effects on consumer applications there's a high level of uncertainty on those markets. To what extent people will still be cautious, to what extent I will get back on track in 2022, 2023. So there's that's still an area where uncertainty is relatively large. But then we do believe that there's a recovery that's going to happen in this industrial application. As I said, it will take time, but eventually the impact of COVID-19 will disappear with time. So taking into consideration all of these, what I mentioned before, we've got our forecast model, and again here I'm presenting just the top line information, are showing a growth that's about 1.7% per year for Europe, for all application sold products that we're covering, 1.4% in the United States. So slightly larger growth for Europe. That's coming notably from the fact that wood preservation applications are relatively mature, very large, and with a slower growth than others, so affecting United States a bit more than Europe. But altogether, what these figures show is that biocides are a major market. They're showing the sign of a major market in both of the regions, with growth that are close to GDP growth. However, these are market average that do not show and that actually hides interesting opportunities in specific applications, interesting opportunities in specific products. So opportunities that are being even more important for certain products where that could be an alternative for a product that is being under scrutiny. So this is what we are looking at in details in the reports, with again with forecasts being done at the level of each active ingredients in each application. Finally, what we do not see on this chart is the space of formulations, because this is showing you the volume growth for single active active ingredients. So again, reports would show also the formulation part of the story that's obviously expected to grow faster than the volume of the market itself. So before getting to the end of this webinar, I just wanted to very quickly mention again the study from which the facts and figures that you've seen in today's webinar have been sourced from. This is our specialty biocide studies that's coming with two key deliverables: a database that I was discussing before, but also a report per country that's looking at each of the different applications we went through together today. We'll be very glad to have a demo of those products with you. Please reach out to me or anybody that would be whose contacts will be on the last slides. And to thank you for your presence today, I'd like to offer all of you a 10% discount on purchasing these reports that would be valid through June 15 this year. So that is it for today's webinar. Thank you very much for attending once again. Very sorry for the technical difficulties. Obviously, the thunderstorm is now gone. It's always happening when you need it less, but at least I was inside and I'm not wet, so I'm looking at the bright side of things. But thanks again for attending. Hope you find it interesting, and I'll be glad to take a few questions now.
Yeah, Nicola, thank you very much for that very interesting presentation. I'm sure our participants found it extremely interesting and beneficial. And I'd like to say thank you for everyone who has participated here today. Just checking our Q&A section, and I see that there are no questions. And yeah, but I'd like to thank everyone once again. And if you do have any questions or queries, please do contact us, send us an email or contact your account manager. And keep watching for more webinar invitations in the next coming weeks. And that's goodbye for now. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.